Many people think that intonation in English is this complicated web of a million rules and various tones. If you are one of these people that believes this, then this lesson is going to help you. I'm going to make English intonation really simple for you today. So simple, in fact, that by the end of this lesson, you're going to fully understand the rules of intonation and be able to use intonation correctly when you speak English. Today, you're going to learn what is intonation, what is the difference between stress and intonation, why is intonation important, and then you're going to learn about the rules of intonation and practice your English intonation with me. I also just want to quickly add, because every time I do a video with a tea cup, people are like, why is there no tea inside? And it's because I've drunk half of the tea inside. So yeah, I actually made this mug. Well, I didn't make it, I painted it. And you can see the little flowers on. And this here holds your biscuits. So yeah. So let's start with, what is the best way to improve your English intonation? Besides listening carefully to other English speakers around you and taking note of how they use intonation in different contexts, one of the best ways to improve your English pronunciation is by taking one-to-one lessons with a private English teacher. An English teacher will go through the rules of intonation with you and ensure that you're using the correct intonation for different contexts. Because the last thing you want to do is cause any confusion, any mistakes in communication, or worse, potentially offend someone using the incorrect intonation. So, where can you find the perfect English teacher to help you improve your spoken English and pronunciation? The best place to find your perfect English teacher is on Preply. With thousands of English teachers to choose from on Preply, you're bound to find your perfect English teacher. You can easily find a teacher who's qualified, experienced and professional, who suits your budget, your learning styles, and of course your availabilities. I'm giving you 50% off your first lesson on Preply. Just use the code EMMA. As a bonus to you, you can also download the free PDF lesson notes for this video down below in the description. The lesson notes contain, of course, a summary of all the notes and all of the rules of intonation mentioned in this lesson, as well as all of the examples and some additional sentences for you to practice with your teacher or by yourself. The link to book your first lesson on Preply is down below in the description. Click it and remember to use the code EMMA to get 50% off your first lesson and start getting feedback on your intonation and pronunciation so you can improve much faster. Thank you Preply for being a sponsor of this video, but besides being a sponsor, I also do take private lessons for Spanish on Preply. So I use it as a student, I've used it as a teacher, and my experience has been fantastic so far, so I highly recommend it. Now it's time to start learning about intonation. Let's start with the first question. What is intonation? Intonation in English refers to the rise and fall of your voice while you're speaking. You use intonation to convey emotion and meaning. Intonation plays a crucial role in the expression of questions, statements, emotions, and it can even change the meaning of words and sentences. For example, look at this sentence. You're leaving. You can completely change the meaning of this sentence by changing the intonation. With a rising intonation at the end, it sounds like you're maybe a bit surprised, or you're just checking if the person's actually leaving. For example, oh, you're leaving? With a falling intonation at the end, it sounds more like a statement. For example, maybe you already know the person's leaving and you're just acknowledging it. Oh, you're leaving. As you can see, intonation completely changes the interpretation of a sentence, making it super important for you to learn. What is the difference between stress and intonation? I've included this question because a lot of people think that stress and intonation are the same thing and they're almost interchangeable terms, but stress and intonation are not the same thing. However, they are kind of like sisters. What I mean by that is you'll often find them go together. So they're not the same thing, but usually they accompany each other. Stress refers to the emphasis that you place on a word or in a part of a sentence. For example, if I say really with a falling intonation at the end, you can still hear that the stress is on the first syllable. While if I say really, now you can hear that the intonation goes up at the end, but the stress is still on the first syllable. Now, when you change the intonation, notice that the meaning also changes. Really, with a falling intonation, sounds more like a statement, while really sounds like I'm either asking a question or I'm surprised. Why is learning about intonation in words important? Intonation helps to give meaning and emotion to what you're saying. It's so important for clarifying meanings, expressing your feelings and emotions, as well as managing the flow of a conversation. Learning about intonation in English will not only help you to convey your emotions and feelings and thoughts, but it will also help you to understand other people's intentions behind what they're saying. In other words, you can study all the vocabulary and grammar in the world, but if you don't understand how intonation works in English, it can lead to communication problems. Now let's look at intonation in words and how to use intonation in words. When it comes to words with just one syllable in English, your intonation will either slide down or slide up when you're speaking. For example, yes and yes. Freya has come to say hi. Hi, baby. She has a little infection in her eye, so she's a little bit gunky today. Hi, baby. Say hi. Little cutie. Leave the tea. Leave the tea alone. Leave the tea alone. Yes sounds like you're asking a question, or you're perhaps unsure about something. It could also indicate that you're about to add extra and further information. For example, have you finished writing your essay yet? Yes. Well, I just need to finish writing the conclusion, but it should only take me about 10 minutes. When you have a word in English with 2 or more syllables, your intonation will jump. For example, never and never. Notice I'm not saying never. It's not sliding. It's never, never. There's a jump between those 2 syllables. Have you ever been to Madrid? No, never. Never? Intonation in sentences. When you stress words in sentences in English, you'll notice that your intonation rises on those important stressed words. For example, I need to study. I need to study. Notice that the words I and t are very weak here and your tone is very low. However, notice that your intonation on the important words need and study goes up. With need, because it's just one syllable, your intonation starts high and then it slides down. Need. With study, your intonation goes high on that first syllable because it's stressed, and then it lowers, it jumps down when you say the second syllable because this is weaker, and also it's the end of the sentence. Study. Intonation in normal speech. Typically, in normal speech, you will find a falling intonation at the end of the sentence. This indicates that you've finished what you're saying. For example, he arrived at noon. You finished your sentence, so your intonation falls on noon. When you've finished your sentence, you typically end with a falling intonation, which is why noon ends with a falling intonation. However, if you want to show that you haven't finished speaking yet, you can use a rising intonation. For example, when I opened the door, I got the fright of my life. When I opened the door, I got the fright of my life. So if I ended the sentence on when I opened the door, the other person would be sitting in suspense thinking, and finish the sentence because I ended with a rising intonation. So to show to the other person, look, I've finished speaking now, you can end with a falling intonation. Giving old and new information. You can use intonation to indicate what is new and old information for your listener. When you think the information is new for your listener, the intonation at the end of your sentence goes down. If you think your listener already knows something, or if something's quite obvious, then your intonation will rise at the end of what you're saying. You can also use rising intonation with information that's a bit redundant. In other words, it may be something that you've repeated from a person's question or something repeated that someone said earlier. For example, what time did Lisa leave? I heard her leave at about 5 o'clock. I heard her leave is redundant information because the first person said, What time did Lisa leave? We're basically repeating a bit of the question. It's redundant, it's shared knowledge, it's shared information, so your intonation rises. However, the new information is at 5 o'clock. This is new, therefore the intonation goes down at the end. Alternatively, you can flip this sentence around and the intonation will still stay the same way, because it doesn't matter where these phrases are, all it matters is what information is there. So you could say, for example, at about 5 o'clock I heard her come in. It sounds weird, sounds a bit like Yoda speech, but it's possible because we don't really care where these phrases are in the sentence. All we care about is whether it's new or old information. Questions. Genuine and checking for information. If you believe that you must use a rising intonation at the end of every question, then you are wrong. Questions in English are usually clear from their grammatical structure. For example, I could say, "You have eaten," and we know that this is a statement. However, "Have you eaten?" is more of a question. We know that because of the grammatical structure. This means that intonation in questions in English can be very flexible. You can use different intonation in questions to show different meanings or different types of questions. If you want to ask a question and you don't know the answer, so it's a genuine question, then your intonation usually falls at the end. For example, "When's your birthday?" I'm asking you with a falling intonation because I genuinely don't know when your birthday is. However, if you want to check or clarify something, so maybe you already know the answer and you're not 100% sure, or you just want some clarification, then your intonation usually rises at the end. So let's stick with the same question we had before. Imagine I say, "When's your birthday?" and I use a rising intonation at the end. This sounds more like, "You've told me your birthday before, but I don't remember when it is exactly, I've forgotten." You can also use a falling intonation at the end of questions when you want someone to agree with something that you've said. For example, "Isn't it cold today?" I'm not genuinely asking if it's cold or not. I'm making a bit of a statement, but in the form of a question, because I want you to agree with me. I'm trying to create a bit of a conversation with you. You can also use rising intonation in questions when you want to express criticism. For example, "Are you crazy?" Or you can use it for surprise. "How much are these?" Be careful when using intonation like this, because there is a huge difference between "how much are these" and "how much are these?" The first one sounds like you're asking a genuine question because we're using a falling intonation, like "When's your birthday?" "How much are these?" It's a real genuine question that you want to know the answer to, so your intonation falls. The second one, "How much are these?" sounds like you're really shocked or surprised, like you can't believe the price of something. So it can come across as quite rude or offensive, so be really careful. Sometimes when you ask a question, you may have an idea what the answer is, so you may want to add that after your question. If you want to do this, then you add a fall rising tone to that little question with that suggestion at the end. For example, "What time does the show start?" "At 2 o'clock. At 2 o'clock. I'll give you another example. "Where have you been all day?" "At work." "At work." And you notice that the intonation goes really down and then really back up again. This is the fall rising intonation. Intonation in question tags. A question tag, or tag question, you can use either one, is a short phrase that we add to the end of a statement to turn it into a question. For example, "You're coming to the party, aren't you?" You can use question tags for checking information, seeking agreement, giving opinions, being a bit critical and sarcastic, and for even emphasizing things. So you can use it to emphasize something that was said earlier. Let's talk about the intonation in tag questions when checking information. The intonation in the first part will fall, but the intonation in the second part, the little question tag, will go up. For example, "The film starts at 12, doesn't it?" Here, we think that the film starts at 12, but we're not 100% sure, so we're just checking. Now, if you want to say something and you're not checking for information and you believe that it's true, you know that it's true, then your intonation will fall and fall on the tag question as well. For example, It's so hot today, isn't it? Like, we know it's hot. It's like 45 degrees outside. So, yeah, you can't deny it. Yeah, right now, luckily it's not 45 degrees, but you are so annoying, aren't you? She's not annoying. She's lovely. Now let's look at seeking agreement and giving opinions. If you're sharing a belief or an opinion and you want your listener to agree with you, then you can use falling intonation. For instance, the film was great, wasn't it? My intonation goes down on the question tag because I'm not actually asking for clarification or confirmation or anything. I'm basically sharing my opinion and I want you to agree with my opinion. Now, if you want to sound more sarcastic, you can use a falling intonation. We usually start these sarcastic phrases with oh, so, and sometimes well. For example, so, you think you're stronger than me, do you? Oh, you think you're smarter than me, do you? Here, I'm not asking an actual question. I'm not being genuine. I'm being a bit sarcastic. Notice as well that I'm using a positive phrase with a positive question tag. When you were first taught about question tags, your teacher may have explained to you that you must use a positive and a negative together. So your question tag should be negative and your statement before that should be positive. So it's always positive, negative, or negative, positive. However, look at what happens when you use positive, positive. It can give the impression of sarcasm or it can be used for surprise. Here's another example. Eating all that cake to yourself, are you? Notice how using positive, positive actually sounds quite sarcastic and quite critical, like, oh, you're actually eating all that cake to yourself, are you? Again, I'm not asking a real, genuine question. I'm being a bit critical, quite judgmental of the other person for eating the whole cake, which I never would, because I am that person that eats the whole cake. Sticking with the theme of sounding a little bit mean and adding some attitude to your intonation, if you want someone to admit something that they didn't previously want to admit or something that they previously didn't believe, then you can use a falling intonation. For example, I told you not to touch that flame, didn't I? So maybe the person before said, I'm going to touch the flame, I'm going to touch the flame. And you said, if you touch that flame, you're going to hurt yourself. Then they touch the flame and you can turn around and say, I told you not to touch the flame, didn't I? Yeah, falling. Finally, if you want to emphasize something that you said before, you can use a falling intonation to do this. For example, that was a stupid thing to do, wasn't it? Falling. So you could just say, that was a stupid thing to do. But to really emphasize it, you can add that question tag at the end, because it kind of makes the other person think like, oh yeah, it was a stupid thing to do. And if you want to do that, use a falling intonation. It's a stupid thing to do, wasn't it? Now let's look at the intonation in questions when you want to give your listener options. When you want to give two possible options to your listener, your intonation will go up on the first option and then down on the second option. For example, do you prefer tea or coffee? Tea or coffee? Here's another one. Do you want to leave now or later? Now or later. So if you have more options, like for example, you may want to say tea, coffee or juice, it will just keep going up until you get to the final option. And then the final option will have a falling intonation. Do you prefer tea, juice or coffee? So it doesn't matter how many options you have, you just keep listing them with a rising intonation and then the final one will have a falling intonation to indicate that it's the end of all the possible options. And finally, intonation in lists. This rule is quite similar to the one that we've just looked at. So when you're giving a list in English and you're reading it aloud, all of the things on the list will have a rising intonation to show that the list is continuing, but then the final item on that list will have a falling intonation, and that falling intonation will indicate, okay, that's the end of the list. For example, so I need to buy some eggs, milk, bread, and butter. So when reading a list, if you keep using a rising intonation and you say something like, so I need to buy some eggs, milk, bread, and you just stop, then your listener will be like, and? Because they're waiting for you to complete that list with a falling intonation. And that's the end of your masterclass on everything you need to know about intonation in English. Your next step now is to go and book your first lesson on Preply and practice what you've learned today. You can book your first lesson using the link down in the description, and remember to use the code EMMA for 50% off your first lesson. If you would like a summary as well as some additional sentences to practice and some activities to remember the rules of intonation, you can download the free PDF. The link to download it is down in the description. If you've enjoyed this lesson, then remember to hit the like button and subscribe if you'd like to see more videos to help you improve your English pronunciation and listening skills. If you've watched all the way to this part of the video, then thank you so much. I really appreciate your time, and I hope that this video has helped you. If you like, you can leave a comment finishing the sentence, "I found this video blank," and then fill in that blank with an adjective that best describes how you found this video. For example, I found this video useful. I found this video helpful. I found this video fun. However you feel about the video, let me know. Enjoy the rest of your week, and I will see you in the next lesson. My tea is now stone cold. It's still in there. But never mind. I hope you've enjoyed this lesson. I will see you next time. Bye bye.